we've already made quite a few videos on the RTX series and everything that's going on with them. And this likely will be the last one for a little while, just because I don't want to overload you guys with the content. But there is something that I want to discuss because I've seen it in the comments on our other videos about the benchmarks that Nvidia released yesterday for the RTX 2080. There's a lot of not necessarily misinformation, but different ways of construing what Nvidia posted, and I just want to kind of clear that up for all of us, evaluate the numbers, and try to temper our expectations about exactly what Nvidia is releasing here. But before I do that, I want to let you know that today's video sponsor is NordVPN. NordVPN has 4,800 different servers in 62 different countries with no data logging, 24/7 customer support through live chat and email, up to 6 simultaneous connections, unlimited bandwidth for those connections, a dedicated IP if you so want, available upon request, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in checking out NordVPN, you can use the link in the video description or in the pinned comment, nordvpn.org/UFDtech to save 77% off of the VPN, which is a great offer. We can't recommend VPNs highly enough in your personal use, in your business use. They're just a necessity, and we want to thank NordVPN for coming on as a sponsor of this video. Quick note that that offer is only valid until September 3rd, so be sure to sign up as soon as possible so you don't miss that 77% off exciting offer. So Nvidia posted 2 pictures yesterday to give us an indication of the performance of the RTX 2080. One of them had actual numbers attached to them in terms of frame rate, and one of them was kind of a misleading chart. It wasn't misleading because if you look at it, it's like totally fine, you can understand it, but a lot of people didn't actually look at how the chart is set up, and so they assume things that aren't potentially there. So I want to talk about that one first, because that's the one that I've seen has a lot more misinformation surrounding it. So it's the one where Nvidia is showing that the 2080 is equal to 2 times the performance of a single 1080, which is well and fine if that's actually true. However, it's not quite that way. Nvidia is showing that if you turn on deep learning super sampling for the 2080, that its performance then becomes 2 to roughly 2.25 times that of a 1080. And some people have taken this to mean that deep learning super sampling automatically gives you free performance, which wouldn't be the case. A graphical option that's built into a video game is not going to give you free performance. What it can do is take up some of the resources that the GPU is allocating to anti-aliasing and then put them on the tensor cores and use the tensor cores for processing all of that. It is not giving you free performance. What this basically amounts to is the same thing as turning off anti-aliasing for the 1080, which I can nearly guarantee they did not do for this comparison chart. They kept anti-aliasing off, but then with deep learning super sampling, you turn anti-aliasing off, you turn that on, and then you have much better performance because it's offloaded to the tensor cores and not actually the GPU core. It doesn't give you free performance. That's not what's happening here. You would also see a jump in performance if you turned off anti-aliasing on the 1080. Removing anti-aliasing from a graphics card is going to free up resources no matter what. It appears that the tensor cores can process DLSS fast enough to give some performance increase, but it's not necessarily a fair comparison to show something that has DLSS versus something that's currently running in anti-aliasing. But it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison that's going on here. Nvidia could have upped the anti-aliasing at 4K to something like 8x, which doesn't even make sense at 4K resolution, in order to actually show this performance gain, because at 4K, if you have 8 times anti-aliasing, of course the 1080 is not going to perform well, and you can go from 15 to 30 FPS by enabling DLSS instead of having anti-aliasing turned on. And that brings me to the other thing that Nvidia released in this blog post yesterday were some actual specific benchmark numbers on the RTX 2080. This falls in line with the comparison chart on the previous one. Nvidia used the key of having the vertical axis be multiple times of performance. Well, if you have your 1080 at 10 FPS and you have your 2080 at 20 FPS, well then that gives you your 2 times performance there. It doesn't actually indicate any sort of real world performance gains or any sort of real world testing. And that's kind of the same thing with the benchmark numbers that they actually showed with the 2080. And they even state right before that image that, quote, GeForce RTX GPUs deliver 4K HDR gaming on modern AAA titles at 60 frames per second a feat even our flagship GeForce GTX 1080 Ti can't manage. That's something that we actually decided to put to the test. We actually benchmarked graphics cards today, and we did benchmark the 1080 Ti to see if it could get 60 FPS at 4K HDR, but instead of testing the 1080 as well, we decided to go ahead and test a 1070 Ti to see, is it possible to get 4K 60 FPS HDR with a 1070 Ti? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the benchmark numbers that we have. Of the games that we used for comparison testing against Nvidia's claims, we did Final Fantasy 15, Hitman, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Far Cry 5. Of those 4 games, the 1070 Ti can hit 4K 60 FPS gaming in 3 of them. The only one it fell short in was Final Fantasy 15, but if we take a look at the benchmark numbers that we have, Final Fantasy 15, it got 53 frames per second, as opposed to the 2080's 60 frames per second. In Hitman, it got 78 frames per second compared to the 2080's 73. It got 70 frames per second in Mass Effect Andromeda compared to the 2080's 67, and it got 76 frames per second in Far Cry 5 compared to their 71. So the 1070 Ti can hit 4K 60 FPS HDR gaming. It just can't. Then if we take a look at the 1080 Ti, well, let's see what it can do, because they said that it can't do 4K 60 FPS gaming. In Final Fantasy 15, we were able to hit 86 FPS. In Hitman, we were able to hit 140 FPS at 4K. We were able to hit 118 FPS in Mass Effect Andromeda. And in Far Cry 5, we hit 81 FPS with the 1080 Ti, which they claim can't do 60 frames per second. And that leads me to the deceiving part of our benchmarks. For the 1070 Ti, we had all the games set to lowest. Is that something we shouldn't have done? Is that a comparable benchmark? We actually don't know, because Nvidia didn't disclose the settings at which they benchmark these games. But it's clear that a 1070 Ti, which, I mean, the 2080 should definitely be able to beat, can keep up in at least 3 of the 4 games that we tested, if we assume that they use the lowest settings. Now, I'm pretty sure that they didn't. There's no way that they would have done that and have everybody find out that when these cards are launched that everything was tested at 4K lowest and they dismally perform when they actually get released and review embargoes come up. And the 1080 Ti's performance numbers are also with 4K lowest settings and completely everything, and it can match 120 FPS in many games. But if we take a look at how we tested the 1080 Ti with 4K high settings in several of the games, in Final Fantasy 15, we got 63 FPS. In Hitman, we got 83 FPS. At 4K max settings, we couldn't go any higher. In Mass Effect Andromeda, we got 67 FPS, which is the exact same that they got. And in Far Cry 5, we got 70 FPS, which is 1 lower than what they put out. So the 1080 Ti at high to max settings in some of the games that they tested absolutely hits 4K 60 FPS gaming. We don't have enough comparable data to actually say whether or not these benchmarks are impressive, because the 1080 Ti can actually do this if you set the settings correctly, and you can get a very playable experience where the game actually looks really nice. So for them to claim that, I'm actually kind of suspect as to why they're saying that. The biggest thing that I think I wanted everybody to take away from this video is that all of the information that Nvidia is putting out there right now isn't comparable. We can't actually say what it's like compared to something else. At least with the 10 series launch, they showed same games, same settings versus the 10 series and the 9 series. Nvidia actually gave us comparison. However, in this series, they don't seem to want to do that, which is concerning to me. It's concerning to me that Nvidia is not being forthcoming, not to the point that I don't think that the 20 series won't perform well, but to the point that I feel like Nvidia is trying to intentionally obfuscate the truth, because they're not actually giving us directly comparable performance numbers like they did with the 10 series. If we take a look at Nvidia's own words that they uttered earlier this year when talking about why they wanted to enforce the GeForce Partner Program, they said, "We want to ensure that gamers have full transparency into the GPU platform and software they're being sold. And also, they're ensuring that gamers know what they are buying and can make a clear choice." By Nvidia's own estimation, they are not doing that. They are not giving us clear comparisons for people to buy into the ecosystem. They're giving us intentionally covered up numbers that don't reveal a whole lot about what exactly people are buying. And even with the RTX naming scheme for games, RTX games don't have to support ray tracing. They can be DLSS without ray tracing, which is great. Deep learning super sampling is a fantastic technology. Ray tracing is a fantastic technology. But when you try to promote something as a ray tracing card and and you find out later that the ray tracing games that you thought you were going to get aren't ray tracing games, well, it doesn't feel like Nvidia is being very clear. It doesn't seem like they're ensuring that gamers have full transparency here into the GPUs that they're being sold, which is the reasoning that they gave for MSI and Asus and Gigabyte for dropping AMD from their gaming card lineups. It doesn't seem like Nvidia is using their own metrics to compare it to themselves about what they're doing here. And I don't want to come across as an Nvidia hater because I absolutely love my Nvidia cards. I love my 1070 Ti. I love my 1080 Ti's. I actually think that they're the best gaming graphics cards on the market, and I think that's what the RTX 20 series is going to be. The RTX 2080 Ti is going to be the best gaming graphics card you can buy, period. But from my perspective, Nvidia is not fully disclosing exactly what's going on here in a way that they haven't done it before and in a way that they thought that they should hold other people to that standard. And I think that it's something that we should have a discussion about. I think that the RTX 2080 is going to be a great gaming card. I think it's going to beat the 1080. It might even beat the 1080 Ti, but the performance numbers that they're putting out, the comparisons that they're putting out, don't give us anything to actually go on. The comparison that they did where they said that the 2080 is equal to two 1080s and then gave us a 1 to 2 times performance bump, that is meaningless without actual FPS numbers. The FPS numbers that they are giving us are also meaningless without settings to actually compare them to. All of this is to say, don't buy anything until reviews come out. That's the whole point that I've been trying to make with all of the things that I've been saying, is that there's not enough information, and the information that's coming out isn't clear enough, it isn't transparent enough for people to make informed decisions about exactly what they're getting. And I think that's the case with these benchmark numbers here too. This is a little post update that I'm just adding into the video because there was more information that came out after I filmed the previous part. Video Cards released some information from Nvidia's Editor's Day, which is embargoed until September 14th, showing some information about the performance difference between Turing and Pascal. They specifically, the reason why it's relevant to this video is they have one that shows Turing shading performance versus Pascal, where it shows that Turing is either 50 to 100% better than Pascal in basic games like Ashes of the Singularity, Rise of the Tomb Raider, 3D Mark, Shadow of War, Deus Ex, Sniper Elite 4, and VR Mark. And again, if those numbers are true, that is amazing. That is a great improvement of Turing over Pascal. They've really redefined the architecture. However, based on the information that we already have about Turing, such as the CUDA core amounts, as well as its teraflop performance, which Nvidia wasn't necessarily shy about promoting in their keynote, the expected performance jump of Turing over Pascal, clock for clock, core for core, is not going to be anywhere near 50%. Obviously, we again don't know how Nvidia is benchmarking these cards and how they're coming up with claims of 50% improvement over Pascal. If you want a more in-depth breakdown of what the expected performance of Turing is based on all of the information that we have, you can check out Adored TV's video, which he released yesterday on all of that. I'll link that up there. It's a great information bit about the actual teraflop performance, how we should expect it to perform in traditional games. And again, I'm not saying that Turing can't be 50% to 100% better. What I am saying is that's a pretty bold claim without a whole lot of substance to back it up, and it's coming from the manufacturer directly. So please, giant grains of salt. Don't pre-order based on expecting that you're going to get 50% better performance, because it might not be there in where you think it's going to matter or where you actually play your games. And it could be in settings that nobody realistically plays in, like 4K with 16 times MSAA and a whole bunch of other settings disabled and enabled that just don't make sense for traditional gameplay. Or it could be totally relevant to you and NVIDIA's not even blowing smoke. Either way, just take it with a grain of salt. Be prepared to be let down or to be encouraged or to be excited. Any way you want to take it, that's fine. My biggest stance here is that Nvidia hasn't been forthright. There's not enough information for us to draw real conclusions, except for the fact that there are things that aren't typical to how Nvidia normally does things, and that draws some red flags that I think we should potentially throw down on the ground and call an audible on. But what do you all think? Do you think Nvidia is being fully transparent with this launch? Do you think that I'm just making bad assumptions about exactly what they're saying? Do you think that there's more information that they could put out there? Do you think that even if they put the information out there that we wouldn't be satisfied enough? I want to hear what you think down in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button if you did enjoy this video. And I also want to remind you that this video is sponsored by NordVPN. So if you want to save 77% off of your VPN, check out nordvpn.org/UFD tech to save money today and start protecting your internet browsing. Anyways, that's going to wrap up this video for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see your smiling faces again in the next video. Love you too. Don't forget to get subscribed. I forgot to say that. Get subscribed. Do it. Please.